Hi, everyone. Welcome to School Lunch, Policies and Practices that Promote Participation, hosted by the Food Research and Action Center. I'm Steve Hayward, FRAC's Communications Manager. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few brief housekeeping items. We expect this webinar to run about 60 minutes. We are recording the presentation and will send the recording and slides in a follow-up email. We'll have time for questions and answers at the end of the presentation. To ask a question at any time, please use the Q&A tab in the bottom panel. Closed captioning is available. To turn captions on, click the CC button in the bottom taskbar and select English as the spoken language. With that, I'll pass it off to Erin Kennedy Heisam, Senior Child Nutrition Policy Analyst at FRAC. Take it away, Erin.
Thanks, Steve, and welcome everyone to FRAC's Thursday webinar during this National School Lunch Week. Next slide, please. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with FRAC, we are a national nonprofit organization working to eradicate poverty-related hunger here in the United States. We do that through three main ways: training and technical assistance, research, and advocacy. Next slide, please. We have a lot to talk about today and not a lot of time, so we're going to jump right on in. I'm going to open up our webinar talking a little bit about the data, talk about food insecurity, National School Lunch Program, the Community Eligibility Provision, and then I'm going to pass it over to our amazing guest speakers. I am so excited to be joined today by a wide variety of school nutrition professionals who can really speak to the collaboration that is needed to make school lunch a success. First, we're going to hear from Brett Foster, Executive Director of School and Nutrition at Knox County Schools in Tennessee. Then we'll hear from Tabitha Napier at Breathitt County Schools. We'll get the state agency perspective from Jamie McMillan, the New York State Education Department, as she shares her CEP story and what the state subsidy has done for school lunch participation. And last but not least, we're going to get the advocacy perspective from Selika Bulger Medina, Director of Government Affairs at Project Bread. I'll come back and share some resources and research at FRAC, and then we'll leave it for Q&A. As Steve mentioned, please use the Q&A function on the bottom taskbar of your screen to enter questions at any time throughout the webinar. Next slide, please. So happy National School Lunch Week. I would be remiss if I didn't start off by thanking all of the amazing professionals that work day in and day out to bring nutritious meals to students across the country, particularly those frontline staff that are working in the cafeterias every day to make sure that our student population is well nourished and ready to learn. We know that school meals are a vital and necessary public health intervention for our country, that they reduce child food insecurity, that they strengthen nutrient intake and health outcomes, and that they support academic achievement. Next slide, please. Just last month, USDA's Economic Research Service released the household food security data for 2023. And unfortunately, for the second year in a row, we saw an increase in food insecurity across the country. But we know that this rate is not equitable in every household in every region, that there are higher rates of food insecurity in the southern regions of our country, that Black and Latinx households face food insecurity at much higher rates than their white households, and that single women-led households are facing food insecurity at higher rates as well. Next slide, please. Food insecurity for children also rose in 2023, and nearly 1 in 5 children are living in households that struggle with food insecurity. I think alarmingly, 30% of those children, 30% of children who might be struggling with food insecurity are ineligible for federal nutrition programs because their household income exceeds the requirements and the limits for a free or reduced price school lunch. Next slide, please. This slide here shows the rates of food insecurity among children over the years from 2019 to 2023. And what you can see is that in 2021, when we were very much still living in the reality of the COVID-19 pandemic, food insecurity among children dropped. And we like to attribute this to the public policies that were available during that time that really supported the American family. The child tax care credit, the expansions to SNAP, and the waivers that were available that allowed all schools in all states to offer all children healthy school meals at no charge. When those waivers were no longer available, we start to see this rise in food insecurity. Next slide, please. And looking at the average daily participation in school meals, again, from the 2018-19 school year, so prior to the pandemic, to 2022-23. And again, if you take a look, in 2021, 2022, we see this peak, the highest level of participation in school lunch. And much of that is attributed to these waivers that allowed all schools to offer all students school meals at no charge. When those waivers expired and the majority of the country returned to that tiered traditional system of certifying children for free, reduced price, or paid, we see average daily lunch participation drop to actually slightly lower than pre-pandemic levels. Next slide, please. So that's why we're here today, to talk about the policies and the practices that increase children's access to the nutritious school meals they need to learn and thrive. Next slide, please. My speaker is going to touch on all of this today, from the benefits of the Community Eligibility Provision, or CEP, to the benefits of state healthy school meals for all policies, and what this has really done to improve students' lives, to support academic learning, to ease operations, and to benefit the whole school community. Next slide, please. At FRAC, we see 3 pathways to healthy school meals for all. That third pathway being the Community Eligibility Provision, or CEP. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with CEP, it is a provision of the National School Lunch Act that allows high-need schools to offer all children school meals at no charge. There is an eligibility threshold to participate, so it is not available to every school across the country. That next pathway is what we're seeing happening state by state. State legislation that really makes healthy school meals for all a reality in those states. And then our ultimate goal is that federal legislation where all children in all states have access to healthy school meals. Next slide, please. Talking about community eligibility, there has been a boom in adoption. More and more schools are participating in CEP than ever before. And if you take a look at the end of this chart, you will see when those pandemic era waivers ended and schools went back to the traditional system, a burst of schools said, no, we're not going back. We want to keep healthy school meals for all. And we saw that big increase from 21-22 to 22-23 in the number of schools adopting CEP. Next slide, please. What you see here is our map, Healthy School Meals for All, available on the FRAC microsite, really mapping the momentum of states adopting legislation to offer healthy school meals to students across the country. So 8 states currently have legislation that offers healthy school meals for all students, and the majority of states either have introduced bills or have coalitions formed and are working towards that state legislation. Next slide, please. Earlier this year, we released a report looking at participation in those first 5 states that had adopted healthy school meals for all in the 2022-2023 school year. And what that report revealed is that all 5 states experienced increases in school lunch participation after passing healthy school meals for all legislation compared to pre-pandemic levels. Next slide, please. And now I am so excited to introduce our first guest speaker to talk about how she is increasing participation in school lunch in her school district. Brett Foster, you are up.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. And I'm glad that there are several participants who have joined to hear about what our local school districts are doing. I am Brett Foster. I'm the Executive Director of School Nutrition for Knox County Schools. Next slide. So this is our district profile. As of making this presentation, we have 60,236 students enrolled. We are in an area of East Tennessee that is rapidly growing. So we see that number increase on a daily basis. We have 91 feeding sites. 51 of those are elementary schools, 16 middle schools, 16 high schools, 4 dedicated preschools, 3 alternative schools, and 1 charter school that we feed. We are a very diverse county economically and demographically. So we have a really high mix of rural, urban, and suburban in our county. So that has definitely been a hindrance to us being able to implement CEP district-wide, but I'm going to talk a little bit about here in a few slides about what we did with the mid-year CEP election and our participation, our state's participation in the Medicaid demonstration project. That's kind of changed the game for us just in this past school year. Next slide. So our school nutrition profile, the programs we offer, the school breakfast program, which we also have some breakfast in the classroom and grab and go breakfast in the classroom models, the national school lunch program, after school snack program, and the fresh fruit and vegetable program. And so just some numbers about that. We feed about 14,000 students a day for breakfast, which we live in an area of the state where parents find it very important to feed their students before they come to school. So we do feel like those 14,000 are kids who definitely need that, but we also have a lot of parents who are opting to feed students before they get to school. So we do offer breakfast at all of our school sites, but that is definitely a low number for us, but we do feel like we are reaching those who need that benefit from us. Lunch, we feed about 33,000 a day. Our after school snack numbers are the most recent claim. We had 14,000 in the month. We definitely anticipate that to increase as some of those programs get started. And then fresh fruit and vegetable program, we operate in 20 of our elementary schools. Next slide. So our CEP story, we started operating CEP in 2014, 2015 when CEP became available nationwide. I have been the director in our district since 2017, but I feel like the CEP story is my baby. I have worked on CEP in a supervisor role ever since we adopted it in 2014. And you can see the numbers there. We definitely saw some dips in our ISP over time. So obviously we had to recertify that in 2018 and then again in 2022. In the next couple of slides, I'll detail a little bit more about 23, 24, and 24, 25. But I can tell you that from 2014 until 2023, we saw a lot of things change in the state of Tennessee as far as how we can capture student data. In 2014 to 2015, we were still matching on Social Security numbers. So obviously that helped us a lot on matching on some of those. But then we were told we had to stop storing those in our student information systems. And so we are no longer matching on that. And that started in between 2014-15 and the 2018-19 recertification. So we definitely saw drops there. But we have never been 100% claiming percentage. We have always opted to go below that. But as you can see on the screen, we definitely had some dips there. And that's one thing that I want to point out is if you are going to adopt CEP and you do foresee that maybe one day down the road that you are going to have schools come off of that, is to develop a really good communication plan of what that looks like, because it was very difficult for us to have to take schools off of that list and have that communication piece to families and to school principals. So if we'll go to the next slide, I'll detail a little bit more about specifically the mid-year CEP election that we opted to use last year. We added an additional 25 schools when the mid-year CEP election became available to us. Some of the motivators behind that for us to consider was the minimum ISP reduction. We were able to drop a little bit lower on that individual school ISP percentage because of that. And then, of course, Tennessee did a pilot of the Medicaid demonstration project last year. And so that was a drastic increase for direct certification matches for us across the state of Tennessee. We weren't able to use all of those in that mid-year election, but that definitely was something that motivated us to take a look at the data to see what we could possibly do in the following school year. Tennessee also rolled out an enhanced direct certification matching process last school year that we were able to use. And that really helped a large district like our size maximize on some of those matches we made through direct certification. The data considerations, like I said before, we weren't able to use all that Medicaid data for existing CEP schools in this mid-year CEP election. We also knew that if we did that, we had to recertify for the 24-25 school year. One of the things that we took into consideration there was that when we did the mid-year CEP election for those 25 schools, we definitely promoted that as a pilot and let families know that it would be for the rest of the school year in hopes that we could continue it, but that we would let them know once we did that data pool in the spring in April for the following school year. We also focused on our feeder patterns just to make sure that we weren't missing any schools where If we just looked at the numbers, were we doing an elementary school and a high school, but not the middle school? We've done that before, and it sometimes is very difficult to explain to families what's happening there. So we really focused on those feeder patterns. We are a large district, and we have a lot of elementary schools feeding into middle schools and high schools. And so we definitely took a look at that to make sure that we were hitting those feeder patterns. We also knew that our ISP would be lower, but with the knowledge that our recertification would be higher because we could actually use that Medicaid data for existing CEP schools. And so our ISP in that mid-year CEP election was definitely lower than what we typically like to do in a district our size for financial reasons. But we went ahead and did that because we felt like it was the best thing to do for students. And we did feel like those were the schools that we were going to be able to implement CEP for the 24-25 school year. And we wanted to go ahead and get the ball rolling on that just because of what we knew it would do for families and provide relief as far as paying for school meals. Next slide, please. So this school year for our CEP schools, we retained all 25 schools and added we added mid-year plus one additional. So we are operating CEP at 64 of our schools in the district, which is 70% of our schools that are participating. We have increased meal participation by 16% at breakfast and 8% at lunch. We definitely have a lot of things in the pipeline for advertising and promotion with our families to make sure that they're aware of this so that we can see those numbers grow even higher. But that was a comparison of this time last year compared to what we are doing today. So last year, those schools were obviously not participating in CEP because that was not affected until January 2024. And the biggest thing for us that I think is that we've just decreased unpaid meal debt by 32%. We have a very high unpaid meal debt in our district, several $100,000 at a time. And so for us to decrease that unpaid meal debt is very significant, not only for us as a school nutrition program, but also our district who covers that at the end of the school year. So it's definitely been a very good move on our part to look at that data, find which schools we felt like that we could include and make sure that every year we're digging into the data to see if we can expand that even further. Next slide. I also wanted to talk about some program initiatives that we have going on specifically what we do to highlight our program, that we do to make sure that kids understand that we want their feedback, and then families can see some of the things that we do for marketing and promotions, and that we are building staff morale so that they're bought into what we're doing as well. So we have an annual food show that we conduct. Last school year, we had 54 manufacturers who came to that, and they provided over 250 food samples for over 600 of our students to try. And we got feedback from that, and that helped shape the rest of the year for us to figure out what items do we want to start looking at in greater detail when we go to food shows, so that we can get more information on them on nutritional values. Obviously, we require that all of these items meet the K-12 standards, but we also look at those and how they fit in with our nutritional analysis for the menu that we're already doing. And then also we take a look at price, because I will tell you that sometimes they bring things that are very expensive, and we have to weigh how do we fit that into our menu as well. For marketing and promotions, we are very lucky to have one person who does marketing for our department. And we have daily social media posts that we post on multiple platforms. One thing that we've decided to do this year is meet the team post. There's a picture of one of those down at the bottom of that slide, just to highlight the teams at every single one of our cafeterias. So obviously that's 91 posts that we're going to be making over the course of the school year. So we do those on the weekend, and we do multiple at the same time, just to try to get all of those. But we really want to highlight our teams that are doing the work out there, and people to see those people and know who those people are in their schools. And then we have a weekly blog called The Secret Ingredient that this week's blog was about National School Lunch Week. And so there's always a topic that's relevant to the time period of the school year. And so that is a good way for us to also highlight what we're doing in our program and shed light on some things that maybe families aren't aware of. For staffing, we had a sizable salary increase this year after our district-wide salary study, and that has made a tremendous impact on our staffing levels. And this is one of the first years since the pandemic that we have actually felt comfortable where we are staff-wise. We've also achieved that with targeted hiring posts. We're very detailed in which schools. When you have 91 schools, it's sometimes difficult when you're trying to hire people because that's a lot of locations to fill. But just like probably most of you on this call, we have some schools that are easier to hire in than others. And so we have targeted hiring posts. We use the signs at the school. We have principals send stuff out just to specific the families in their school if we have specific openings there. Some other things we do for staffing morale, we do a certification and credentialing bonus through the School Nutrition Association. And so we have district-owned membership, so we pay for their membership, but they can opt to do certification or credentialing through SNA, and we pay a bonus for that annually. We also have an annual KPI bonus for managers where we pay based on performance of labor cost percentage, food cost percentage, inventory turnover rate, and their health scores. And then we also do a recognition program every month that called the monthly Golden Scoop Award for employees who have gone above and beyond just their daily duties. And there's also a picture of that on the screen as well, of one of our managers receiving her certificate and a little gift, and then a spray painted Golden Scoop. So those are just some things that we try to do a very high level to promote our program outside of just the ins and outs of feeding students daily. Next slide. So that's all I have. I do have my contact information on the screen if there are any specific questions about anything that I shared. Happy to talk to you more about some of those things if they're of interest to you, or if you have any questions about how to look at data for CEP. I've been doing it for a really long time, so happy to help any way that I can. Thank you all.
Right, thank you so much. That was so informative, and I love your conscientiousness and thoughtfulness on engaging CEP schools and families, the impact it's had on the meal debt, and the focus on your staff. The Meet the Team is so fantastic. So thank you for sharing all of that. All right, next up, we have Miss Tabitha Napier from Breathitt County Schools in Kentucky. You can take it away, Tabitha.
Good afternoon, and thanks so much for having me. In celebration of National School Lunch Week, it's an honor and a privilege to speak to you all today. I'm Tabitha Napier, School Nutrition Director and Registered Dietitian for Breathitt County Schools in Jackson, Kentucky. Today, we'll talk about school meal policies and practices and ways to increase meal participation in our school districts. Today, I'm going to talk about something that we should all feel very passionate about, and that's feeding our kids. Next slide, please. Just a bit of background information about me and my district. I was born in Eastern Kentucky, and I'm a lifelong resident of Breathitt County and a graduate from Breathitt County Schools, where I'm employed. I went on to graduate from Morehead State University, and I completed my dietetic internship there as well. My school food service rotation was actually spent at Breathitt County Schools, as Betty Sally, former Breathitt County School Food Service Director, served as my mentor. I was very fortunate to be hired in 2005, right after graduation from Morehead State University, as the new school nutrition director at Breathitt County Schools. Today, I'm in my 20th year as school nutrition director there. Over 20 years, it's definitely encompassed a lot of changes in the food service world. I began in the old days before nutritional guidelines came on the scene. Other than making sure all meals contain the required components, we had all the flexibility in the world with what we could put on a child's plate. The days and months of processing meal applications and reviewing meal eligibility guidelines to determine if a child would qualify for free, reduced, or paid meals. The days of mailing bills home to parents and trying to collect unpaid meal debt. Fast forward to around 2012, 2013, and the introduction of the community eligibility option, followed by new and constantly evolving meal standards, and school meals, as I had always known it, did a complete 360. Next slide, please. Some things about my school district. Again, I have been fortunate enough to work here for almost 20 years now. We are a very small school district, a public school district in Eastern Kentucky, set in a rural Appalachian foothill county with a population of approximately 13,600. We have 4 schools total in our district, comprised of 3 elementary schools and 1 middle high school combination. 3 of our schools are within city limits and a few mile radius of each other, and another school is located further out in the county approximately 11 miles away. We have approximately 1,676 total students district-wide from preschool through 12th grade. Due to declining population and efficient use of resources, our schools have consolidated over the years and grade configurations have changed. One interesting note, our middle and high school are in the same building, comprised of approximately 692 students from grades 7 through 12. Next slide, please. Just a little bit about the different meal programs that we operate in our district. All 4 of our schools participate in the school breakfast program and offer various models. 2 of our 3 elementary schools offer traditional breakfast, or what I would call breakfast after the bell, as a class. This means that breakfast is incorporated into the daily master schedule, and student meal participation typically is the highest with this model. The other elementary school offers breakfast before the bell and not as a class. Students have the option to eat if they would like. The principal and lunchroom manager are working on ways to increase participation and offer incentives for these students to eat, thus producing a higher participation than years past. Our middle high school offers breakfast before the bell, but they also offer second chance breakfast between first and second class period for any student that didn't get the chance to eat before the school day began. Second Chance Breakfast has doubled our breakfast participation and is a great asset to our middle high school. All 4 of our schools participate in the National School Lunch Program, as lunch is incorporated into the daily master schedule at all schools. All 4 schools also participate in the after-school snack program, operating this program 2 days a week, offering a nutritious snack to students who stay for educational enrichment or other school activities. Our elementary schools have been fortunate enough to receive the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Grant for many years. The middle high school is not eligible, but this grant provides a free fruit or vegetable to our elementary students and is typically served in the afternoon as a snack after meal service has ended. Our district also participates in the summer food service program. We sponsor both congregate and non-congregate sites and use schools and mobile feeding sites as opportunities for our students to receive meals in the summer. Next slide, please. A bit of staggering but realistic numbers about our area, as you can see by the graphic. Over 45% of our kids are living in poverty in Breathitt County. 79% of our kids are income eligible for federal nutrition programs, leaving only 21% of our kids who are ineligible. So in other words, approximately 4 out of 5 of our children would qualify for free and reduced meals. Unfortunately, these numbers have continued to grow, and they are the highest in my 20 years that I've been here as director. Various factors include people leaving the area for employment opportunities, as well as the flood of 2022, which caused even more people to leave the area to find housing. Next slide, please. That brings us to the Community Eligibility Provision. Some observations when we began. It was very new and it was scary. Some huge positives for our district. We knew all students would eat free, and the labeling and stigma of being a free or reduced child would go away. We were really excited, no meal applications at all, and it would also ease administrative burdens of processing those applications. It would also end unpaid meal debt, no more bills going home in the mail or unhappy parents. But we were also worried. What would our finances look like if we didn't get to claim all meals at the free rate? What would our local Board of Education think about having to pick up the difference? And how would this affect our meal participation? Next slide, please. So In the school year of 2012-2013, the state of Kentucky was one of 3 states picked to participate in the year 1 rollout for the CEO program. In the early years, it was referred to as an option or CEO rather than a program. In the first year, there were very, very few counties in the state of Kentucky that agreed to join, and most all, like Breathitt County, came from the eastern part of the state. In 2012-2013, our local Board of Education voted for Breathitt County Schools to participate in the CEO program, and we've never looked back. Today, over 10 years later, over 90% of schools in Kentucky participate in the CEP program. It has been an incredibly huge success for the state and children of Kentucky. So, what do our numbers look like in Breathitt County schools? Our ISP for April 2024 was 74.8%. This means that almost 3 out of 4 of our students are directly certified. What does directly certified mean? That means that those students automatically qualify for free meals because they receive SNAP or Medicaid benefits or are deemed foster children or homeless. Our ISP percentage multiplied by the 1.6 multiplier factor gives us a claiming percentage of well over the maximum 100% claiming rate. A school district must have a minimum of at least 40% of students identified as directly certified. Again, our district is almost 75%. So what does that mean for Breathitt County schools? That means we receive the maximum reimbursement rate for every meal served and claimed. Increased meal reimbursement leads to excess revenue, which in turn allows districts to make improvements. Examples include updating equipment and eating areas, offering good quality menu items for students, and giving pay raises to staff members. Of course, meal participation is key to financial sustainability. Next slide, please. So what can we do as school nutrition professionals to increase and sustain good meal participation? One thing that we do in Breathitt County schools is farm to school. Breathitt County Schools was one of the first school districts picked in the state in October 2014 to promote Farm Fresh Fridays. We developed a task force with John Kane, who was a member of Action for Healthy Kids at the time, and Tina Garland at the Kentucky Department of Agriculture. We also scheduled taste testings with our students, incorporating local food products, and offered fresh foods and Kentucky Proud products as much as possible on our menus. Our school district is a second-year recipient of the LFS grant, which is the Local Food for Schools grant. It's allowed us to purchase and procure local food and Kentucky Proud items, such as gala apples, as you'll see in the pictures, hamburger patties, and other items to be delivered and served to our students in the very near future. The LFS grant reimburses our school district for items we procure locally. Farm to School also allows school districts to connect to local farmers and establish partnerships with businesses and community members and organizations. Next slide, please. Something else that we can do to increase meal participation and is vital in all school districts is student engagement. Our district has a nutrition council at the middle high school. It's comprised of at least 2 students from each grade and more if the interest is there. They meet with myself on a routine basis, give input and suggestions on the menu and food service operations at their school. They also participate in scheduled taste testings, student surveys, and other activities as scheduled. Our district also has a local wellness policy committee as required by regulation. Students also participate and offer an essential voice on district policies and changes and offer suggestions to improve the overall district wellness. Next slide, please. So, September completed our second month of the school year, and the reimbursement claim has been filed. I'm pleased to say that our average daily lunch participation for the district for the month is 81%. That's an increase from last month, and I expect it to steadily climb a bit more into the school year. Next slide, please. Thank you so much for your time. Please contact me at my email if I can help you in any way or if you have any further questions.
Thank you so much. I mean, as you're talking, I just kept getting community, community, community out of everything that you were sharing, how embedded within your community you are personally, and then everything that you are doing for your community through the lunch program. So thank you very much. I appreciate it greatly, you sharing your story. We'll travel up to the state agency level next to hear from Jamie McMillan at the New York State Education Department as she shares what their state legislation and CEP subsidy has done for participation in New York. Take it away, Jamie.
All right, thank you, Erin. I just want to thank you for allowing me this opportunity. And I just heard some great stuff from Brett and Tabitha, and I wrote down some great ideas of what you guys are doing in your program. And 81% participation, I think, is astronomical, and I think that is wonderful. And so kudos to everybody out there and all the hard work. I'm Jamie McMillan. I have worked for the child nutrition programs in New York State for like 22 years. I've actually looked through the participation list from people on the webinar today, and it's so great to see that some of our schools are on here and some of the advocates that we work with that have really made our CEP successful in New York State are also on here. So this just shows how supported this system is. All right, next slide. So for New York State, we participate in the National School Lunch Program. We oversee the school breakfast program, the special milk program, and we also in our office handle the summer food service program. We also administer the fresh fruit and vegetable program. We do the grant programs, and we also do local foods for schools right now. We are a very large state. We have a lot of students. We have 2.7 million students in New York State. We have 1,041 school food authorities. So that's how many districts are participating in our program in 5,024 school buildings. So we're a very large state. And we also have New York City, which really impacts our numbers. So their participation really impacts like how much funding we receive, how much funding we paid out, our review system. So having a large city school district has really helped our CEP numbers. Okay. Next slide. Yep. So we have the New York State CEP state subsidy. This has been a wonderful program. And so what this is it started in the 23-24 school year, and New York State subsidizes CEP meals by ensuring schools that qualify, apply, and that get approved for CEP receive additional state reimbursement for paid meals served that is equivalent to the free reimbursement rate. So basically, when schools submit their claims for reimbursement, they get this for the CEP schools, they get the same amount of reimbursement that they receive for the free meals that they get for the paid meal. So the paid reimbursement equals the free reimbursement, which has been wonderful because, you know, during these topics today, it's talked about the financial stability of operating a CEP. And what this does is allow CEP to be financially stable. So what happened here was our Department of Budget was analyzing healthy school meals. And because we are such a large state, there was a huge price tag on it. It would cost over $300 million to implement universal free meals in New York State. So what we did was we kind of evaluated our data. And so while we were looking at our data was when USDA put out the proposed rule changing the ISP from 40% down to 25%. But historically, when schools are close to that 40%, they don't really apply for CEP because you have to put in the extra funding to make sure that you're covering all the costs. So we knew schools, even if it went down to 25%, the chances of them applying was going to be very minimal. So we had discussions here and we kind of ran our numbers and we're like, all right, if they're going to lower the CEP ISP, that means more schools can apply. So we kind of sat down and looked at our data to see how much it would cost to subsidize those paid meals. And we kind of went through, we did it incrementally because we knew it was proposed to be lowered to 25%, but we weren't really sure if it would go down to 25%. So we kind of looked at our numbers like, all right, if it stays at 40, how many more kids can we get? And we just kind of went down by 5 to see how much it would cost. So we put the number forward to our budget authority. I think it was $130 million price tag to subsidize the paid meals for the CEP schools. And we didn't know what was going to happen. And so we're constantly checking to see when our budget would come out, what would be in there? Would it be universal? Would it be the subsidy? Fingers crossed that something was going to be in there because we were worried that there would be nothing for the meals in the budget. But luckily we did get the New York State subsidy. So it was a wonderful thing. We had to make some changes instantly. So the budget came out like mid-April. It was right at the time when we were starting to collect CEP applications, and we had to explain it. So CEP is very complicated, and trying to come up with a way to explain it to business officials and superintendents so they understand the impact of the subsidy was took a little time to kind of work through it, but we had a lot of support. Like I said, our advocates are great in New York. We met with them often to discuss it. We have support from leadership here. And our food service directors are amazing and they want to feed the kids. And so this was a great opportunity. So we opened up our CEP application with our New York State subsidy, and then we had over 600 more schools apply, which was great. We had to reprogram our system just to make sure that this was all payable, because it's a whole different system to pay this extra money. So it was a lot of finagling and a lot of work on the ground to get it all set up. But once the application started rolling in, we thought, wow, this is great. There's so many more kids that are going to be able to receive free meals in New York State, and our schools are going to get so much more money to help support the programs, which, in a time when there's not a lot of help out there, we're dealing with supply chain issues, we thought this was great for our schools. So then we were just waiting every day, and USDA released the final rule where they changed the ISP down to 25%, which was all right. So we're riding this excitement of just a subsidy, and now this drop for the 25% ISP, which was great because it came out in the end of September. So we had our webinars set, we had all of our memos written, we were ready for this 25% to come out. So luckily, we worked closely with USDA to get a waiver to allow the mid-year implementation. Our schools were wonderful. We put our memo out stating our application was opening on a certain date. At 5 o'clock that morning, we had applications in our mailbox with people excited to apply for that new 25% ISP and get more schools in. So then we added another 600 plus schools into CEP with that mid-year election. Okay, next slide. And so now in New York State, this was with our CEP subsidy, and the drop to the ISP was we increased our enrollment in the CEP program to 2.3 million students. So this is right here, pretty much the history of CEP. So you can see we did start with the community eligibility option in 2012-13 when it first came out, and each year it just slowly went up. And you can see in 23-24 with the 2.3 million students in CEP is just wonderful. And like I said, I've been here 20 something years, and that was probably the most rewarding thing we've ever done, because those applications just started coming in, and the conversations that we were having with schools and the push the schools were doing to their administration was just wonderful, just to see the excitement and how it would impact our kids. Okay, next slide. And so on here, I just wanted to show kind of the history of CEP. So when we first started with CEP, we had 692 buildings operating CEP, and now we're up to 4,336, which is awesome. So even last year we had 4,200, and now this school year we still added another 136 buildings. But I think the greatest thing that has come for this is the amount of meals served. So comparing our data from meals served in the 23-24 school year back to the 22-23 school year, we have served 20 million more lunches in New York State, which I think is absolutely amazing, especially since we did do mid-year implementation once the CEP ISP dropped down to 25%. So that wasn't even a full year of all these schools operating CEP. So I'm hoping this school year we see an even bigger jump. And same thing with breakfast. 13 million more breakfast is just great. And it's a lot on our schools. So we still had staffing issues, we still had supply chain issues, and now you have all these more meals that you're serving, but you have the financial support, which I think has helped our schools, and the support from legislators and the support from all the government officials really pushing this program. And I think that's helpful. And so just the impact in the last school year was great. We even compared it to our pandemic numbers, and we're actually more meals served even during the pandemic, or we're serving more meals now than we were during the pandemic, which I think is awesome. But it also shows that it's needed, and it also shows that having community eligibility really can help these families and really help these schools. And one of the things that's hard about being in New York State is our cost of living is very high. And so you have a federal income scale for families submitting applications, and what it costs to live in New York is not the same as Vermont. So there should be some adjustment based on where you live, but there really isn't. So you're not really able to get these kids that are really needy or right on that level where they're not quite meeting the income guidelines. You really want to get them free meals because they really do need it. And it's hard on families and it's expensive right now. And so for us to be able to reach all these kids with free meals is just wonderful. All right, next slide. And so what's next? So we have all this great money in our programs right now, and we do have a strong union here. So, our first push is really, we want to increase the amount that staff is getting paid, but sometimes it's hard in our schools because the unions are so strong and it just depends on where they are in the contract. But we definitely want to make sure that the employees in the schools are compensated for the hard work that they do and their dedication really to the program. In addition to pushing for that, we just want to improve the program. Anything that can better the programs, we're really pushing for local food training. So we're hiring culinary specialists to go into schools and train them on cooking local foods, kind of going back to scratch cooking and from the beginning. And so there's all this money so we can buy more stuff. And even with the local foods for school grants, we can get more fresh products in the schools, but also, in New York State, we have a harsh winter. So you have to buy the products, in the summer and fall, and then we can teach the schools what to do with those products, how to store those products, how can they extend those products for the year. So that's what we're focusing on right now. We are actually hosting our first Farm to School Summit in November, which is very exciting. So we're going to do culinary training. We're going to have field trips. There's going to be a lot of hands-on learning. And so we're very excited for that. We're focusing on promotion materials for our schools. So anything our schools can use to promote the program. We just want to be there to support the schools. I think sometimes the state agency gets a bad rap because we're going in and auditing the schools, but we really are here to support and make sure that they have the resources to be successful, and that we want to build these relationships and just make sure that we can turn this into a wonderful program. And we really do have some incredible, incredible programs out there already. But thank you very much for having me here. And I think it's been such a wonderful talk.
Jamie, thank you so much for providing that state agency perspective. And I think you kind of reiterated and really exemplified what Tabitha and Brett were talking about as well, is that we have the eligibility guidelines, and then we have populations of people and families and children who are still at need and facing food insecurity and facing hunger, and they're just not qualifying. So really the power of community eligibility, the power of state policy. And now I'm going to turn it over to Salika to talk about Massachusetts and how they were able to pass healthy school meals for all in all schools across the state.
Thank you, Erin. And it's such a pleasure to be here with you folks. Thank you so much for the invitation to come speak to everyone. My name is Salika Bolga-Medina. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Director of Government Affairs with Project Bread here in Boston, Massachusetts. And we are a statewide anti-hunger advocacy organization. Next slide, please. So in terms of our recipe here in Massachusetts for creating a permanent universal school meal program, our ingredients were the right time, the right policy, and the right people. Next slide, please. As one of our anti-hunger champions always says, Rep. Jim P. McGovern, hunger is a political problem. We have the resources, we always have. We just need the political will to solve it. Next slide, please. And here in Massachusetts, unfortunately, the right time was for better and for worse. For better, school meals rode on the coattails of a general conversation in the state on student nutrition. It was really at the forefront of the state's agenda because we got it passed for the 2022-2023 school year. So that was like right off of COVID and the federal waivers expiring. But we were able to ride the coattails of, like I said, breakfast after the bell legislation, and also bills to try to address school meal debt. And like I said, for worse, with the pandemic and the federal waivers expiring, we're continuing to see increased rates of food security in Massachusetts. Obviously due in part to, skyrocketing prices of groceries and specifically here in the Northeast, housing and healthcare costs as well. Next slide, please. So for most anti-hunger advocates, specifically for folks on this call, you're probably familiar with, the benefits of a universal school meal program. What we found, so our legislation is actually pretty simple. It's like maybe 150 words, and it basically stipulates that, all schools providing school lunch and breakfast under the National School Lunch Act and the Child Nutrition Act, respectively, have to provide those meals at no charge to all students, regardless of income. And our Department of Secondary and Elementary Education reimburses the difference between the USD, the amount paid by USDA and the set free rate. In terms of specifically in Massachusetts, though, research showed that the School Meals for All program was saving Massachusetts families up to $1,300 per student annually. So in terms of from an advocacy standpoint, this was a benefit to not just lower income families, but even middle income families who now have, more expendable income to spend on our local economy. And in terms of health benefits here in the state, there was a research study done by Tufts University, which showed that universal school meals could be associated with something like $150 million in cost savings from direct medical cost, like from conditions like diabetes, cancer, long-term health issues, just by forming those healthy eating habits at school. Next slide, please. So our program works. As you can see on the slide, between October of 2019 and October of 2022, more than an extra 100,000 students participated in universal school meals daily. So to put things in perspective, that would fill the venues of our beloved Red Sox and Patriots. It would fill both venues. So that was quite a boon for our state. We're kind of small, so that was monumental. And on top of that, over 30,000 of those students previously qualified for free meals, but weren't taking advantage of free meals. So that just speaks to what this policy can do for reducing stigma for students throughout the state. Next slide, please. And here's a quote from one of our public school systems, just to speak to the impact that it had on reducing stigma for this particular district, but we saw trends like this throughout the state. I'll give folks a second to read that. Next slide, please. So next, we also had to have the right people. And this is where we as in Project Bread, we served as the backbone organization for the Feed Kids Coalition. And the Feed Kids Coalition is a cohort of over 130 members comprised of stakeholders in various sectors, such as encompassing healthcare, education, the business community, social service providers, and even faith-based organizations. Say that 3 times fast. And like I said, we served as the backbone organization for this coalition. But we were so fortunate to have so many strong ally members throughout the entire state working diligently in support of school meals for all. Next slide, please. So as I just mentioned, we had a huge cross-section of stakeholders involved in the Feed Kids Coalition. And throughout the campaign, we leveraged our different relationships with each other, with all of these grassroots leaders, to support the validity of our argument for school meals for all through the lenses of these different perspectives. Being able to illustrate A, the diverse need for a permanent school meals program, and B, to showcase the program's benefits beyond the classroom. Those were two major keys to the success of this campaign. And I just threw out a couple of quotes from various written and oral testimonies during our public hearing process for the legislation here. So as you can see, the impact of school meals on our greater society is significant, ranging from contributing to our state's food safety net, to being a moral issue, to supporting the education of our future workforce and being able to support them K to 12. Next slide, please. In addition to those grass top leaders, we didn't just rest on those grass top laurels. We also directly engaged parents and students throughout Massachusetts who have lived experience with hunger, and we empowered them to share their experience as their expertise on the issue of school meals for all. And like I said, this is a quote pulled from direct testimony from an elementary school parent. Like I said, the societal impact that universal school meals has on parents and our society at large is real. Next slide, please. So we combined, that grass top leadership coalition with grassroots advocacy. Collectively, we organized over 4,200 people throughout the state. Massachusetts is small, so it's kind of a big deal. We organized over 4,200 people throughout the state to directly engage their legislators in various ways. And some of those folks also participated in the direct legislative process by, participating in the public hearing by submitting written testimony or presenting live at the hearing. And it got back to us from legislators that school meals for all was the #1 issue that they heard about from their constituents. And this ultimately translated into support from over 2/3 of the entire Massachusetts legislature. Next slide, please. So we're not resting on our laurels here. We're continuing to promote equitable access to school meals. And on the next slide, you'll see a couple, 2-3 bullets on what we've got kicking around in Massachusetts next. In terms of showcasing the positive impacts of school meals for all, while School Meals for All is a permanent program, we still have to make sure that the program is funded appropriately every year. We're so pleased that participation has continued to skyrocket, and kids are getting the nutrition at school that they need and deserve. So we need to make sure that the program keeps up financially. And part of that is a lot of policymakers, it's hard to realize the true impact of a policy just reading it on a piece of paper. So what we do here in Massachusetts is we invite different state legislators to school cafeteria visits in their district to see and taste the positive impacts of the School Meals for All program for themselves. Being able to talk to parents, talk to the students, and really get that immersive experience with the program. And as you can see, we're also going to try to contribute with any federal legislation to engage our members of Congress. And next slide, yes, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I try to keep it super fast. Right on
Great, you
time.
did great, Saba. There's
Thank
so
you so
much
much for having me. It was a
information.
pleasure.
Yes, thank you for joining us and really rounding out the presentation showing the power and potential of healthy school meals for all. Next slide, please, Steve. I know we're getting towards the end of our webinar now. I just want to highlight, we do have resources, some that we discussed, some of the research I discussed available on our websites. Next slide, please. Including our Healthy School Meals for All website, where you can see federal legislation that we are advocating for. You can see the bills that we are supporting that would expand and increase access to CEP, and you can look at the map that maps the momentum of Healthy School Meals for All. Next slide, please, Steve. I'm going to take it right to questions because we are right at 4 o'clock. We do have one question in the chat, and I want to bring it to Brett and Tabitha. It says, can the guests speak to any challenges with financial sustainability of the program? So I'm assuming with community eligibility. Any outstanding concerns about the program's longevity?
I can jump in. For us, we're obviously a district who has to take that into consideration because we are not district-wide CEP and we do not have a 100% claiming rate. That is one thing. I mean, you will have to look at that and run the numbers for your district individually, because that's going to look different for every district. For us, reducing the unpaid meal debt was a huge factor in for lowering our claiming percentage, just because we were getting hit on both sides because a lot of those kids that weren't paying were paid reimbursements anyway, and then they weren't paying us for meals. And so definitely want to take that in consideration. What does your unpaid meal balance look like? Because that can make a difference in deciding what your ISP, how low that can drop and what your claiming percentage would be. We have never claimed at 100%, and we have been financially solvent since 2014-15. We have not had to ask the district for funds to cover expenses for our department. So happy to chat more if you wanted to reach out to me directly about specific things you can look at, because I know we're running short on time, but definitely want to take a look at those numbers if you don't think you can implement it district-wide and or with 100% claiming percentage.
Thank you. I really think we've heard a lot about the increase in meal debt since the end of those pandemic waivers, and making sure we're factoring those into our financial calculations is so important. There is a slide on the presentation that you'll get as you look through the webinar and the follow-up email where we list out all of the bills right now in the House and in the Senate that would expand CEP and increase access and make it more financially viable. And a number of those bills actually talk about increasing the federal multiplier, which essentially means more federal dollars are going into CEP schools so that more schools at lower rates can implement community eligibility. And then there's less pulling from state budgets, such as New York or Massachusetts, like we heard from today. Again, thank you to everybody. I know we didn't have a ton of time for questions, but you please reach out to me if you have any other questions, you want to follow up with any of our presenters, of any of our speakers. We appreciate you joining us today. A special thank you to everyone on the webinar, Brett, Tabitha, Celica, and Jamie. And again, happy National School Lunch Week. Thank you very much to all of our school nutrition professionals, particularly all of those working out in the cafeteria, serving America's youth every single day. Thank you guys very much and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you.